One of the most unofficial days on the NFL calendar is on the way, Black Monday, when coaches get fired and all kinds of moves happen around the NFL. Could there be any changes for the New Orleans Saints? And what other changes are you watching from around the league that could benefit the New Orleans Saints? We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget we're free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by Ultimate Football GM, the mobile game that you absolutely cannot miss. I absolutely love this. I love this game so much. It is basically like if you've ever wanted to become like an NFL GM, manage your own football franchise, make decisions from coaching changes to draft picks to trades, player trades, all that stuff, manage a salary cap. You can do all of it on your phone. Super fun game. I'll tell you more about them later, but if you want to check it out, ultimate-gm.com or search for Ultimate Football GM in your app store. You can get a 100% boost, all Locked On listeners, by using the promo code Locked On in all caps in the game's store. On today's episode, it's our second Wednesday episode. We'll have crossover Thursday tomorrow morning or late tonight for those of you on the audio side. And kind of the focus of today, as we do in every War Room Wednesday, is breaking down the biggest questions surrounding the team. So some of those questions come for you. Some of them are just kind of obvious questions, but I've got a couple of them actually that all come from folks that have listened to the show. So thanks very much for participating. The first thing we're going to discuss is Black Monday, which is on the way, the Monday after the final Sunday of games, which would be next Monday. We'll discuss and how what you're watching across the league and how the New Orleans Saints could be involved in that day. We'll discuss whether or not Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus Maye will be the safeties next season. This comes from something that I brought up in an episode on Tuesday when I did mock drafts, thinking about bringing in a safety behind them because Marcus Maye has a suspension on the way. So what will the Saints safeties look like in 2022? Could they go a different direction? And finally, really interesting question here. If Sean Payton becomes a head coach somewhere, he's openly discussed trading for Taysom Hill. If he were to actually do that, what could the Saints get in return? So we're going to break down all of those. We're going to start today with Black Monday because it's the most up-to-date situation or the thing that's kind of closest here. Black Monday is such an interesting day. So for those of you that don't know, Black Monday is the day that usually head coaches get fired across the NFL, as well as some other moves and things that can happen, some coordinator changing, things like that. That will follow this Sunday's games. So basically Monday the 9th, we could be seeing a bunch of head coaching positions opening up. So what are you watching for, and could the New Orleans Saints be a part of that conversation? Well, it depends on if the New Orleans Saints decide to quickly make a decision at their coordinator spot on the offensive side or making any shifts on the defensive coordinator side that quickly. I don't think that they will, though. So I wouldn't expect to see any New Orleans Saints coaching staff moves on Monday. And my expectation still is that Dennis Allen will be back in 2023. So obviously you're not expecting to see that in 2023, but what you are, or on Monday, but what you are looking to see is where coaches get fired, where coaches get canned. Now, obviously the playoff teams are exempt from this, right? Teams like the Los Angeles Chargers, Brandon Staley, he's safe for that week. Mike McCarthy in Dallas, he's safe for that week. Those are ones you're going to be watching for after the playoffs or even just right after their playoff exits. The other teams that you're going to be watching here, though, the Arizona Cardinals, they're a big one to figure out exactly what's going on there. Possibly the Carolina Panthers. You'll hear Julian Council of Locked On Panthers and I talk about that in tomorrow's episode. But they might make a decision on Steve Wilks, at least at that point. I could very much see Steve Wilks sticking in Carolina, though. I think he's done an excellent job with them. And then you're looking to see if there's a surprise move somewhere around the NFL as well, like maybe a surprise retirement or something like that, or a move that happens at the beginning of the offseason because of a coach that is set to retire over the course of the offseason. Sometimes what will happen is that like a coach will announce their retirement early so that it gives the team the advantage of being in the first wave of coaching hires, sets them up in the best position possible to bring in a head coach. So these are the kinds of things that you're going to be watching for. The other thing is like, who are some of the position coaches or coordinators or head coaches that get moved on from, and how does that impact New Orleans in terms of potential coordinators that could potentially hit the market out there, right? Like, there's going to be situations where DeMeco Ryans, who, if the 49ers make the playoffs, then that's out of the question in terms of anything happening on Black Monday, but he's going to be a hot head coaching name. But there will be some of those guys that end up moving on from their teams this offseason that aren't necessarily going to be head coaching conversation. They're going to get instead coordinator conversation. So, does kind of like what happened with Frank Reich during the season. So is there some surprise move that happens around the NFL in that scope that could end up benefiting the New Orleans Saints? So those are some of the things that you're going to be watching. The other thing to keep an eye out on Black Monday is like the rumors getting started around what this team's going to do at quarterback, what that team's going to do at quarterback. The reason why this is relevant to the New Orleans Saints is because if you start to get reports that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to test the market next week, then the New Orleans Saints are all of a sudden a part of that conversation. If Geno Smith decides he wants to test the market rather than stick around in Seattle, or instead of just taking Seattle at face value and, wants to see what else is out there for him, you could find that news potentially this week. So there's a lot of those elements that will end up kind of starting to leak during that time that have a big time impact on where the New Orleans Saints go over the offseason. Because while there's very unlikely to be a head coaching change for the New Orleans Saints, barring a very unlikely Sean Payton return, there is the chance that the offensive coordinator position changes, that the defensive coordinator position change, that somebody gets an opportunity elsewhere, and then we'll start to get into position coaches and coordinators that are getting phone calls to go and interview for positions and things like that over the next few weeks as well. So the Saints are going to be entering this conversation pretty early in the offseason, just because of the nature of them not being in the playoffs, but also because of the nature of like who they're going to be looking for and what they're going to be looking for. And then of course, the reason why you're looking for the Arizona Cardinals and you're keeping an eye on that, and you're looking at other spots like the Houston Texans and the Carolina Panthers, even though they might not necessarily be like at the front of the line for a guy like Sean Payton, they could potentially impact the bidding war that could take place there. So there's a lot of those different, potential things that you're watching during Black Monday. But will the New Orleans Saints take part in Black Monday? Certainly not from the head coach spot, it doesn't look like, but the coordinator spots are going to be ones to watch for sure. So just a quick thought on all of that. And so pay close attention to the rumors that you're seeing about quarterbacks, pay close attention to the things that you're seeing when it comes to other teams moving on from coaches, and of course, other positions that could become available and other rumors that you see out there as well. So lots that the New Orleans Saints, even without a head coaching change, will be impacted by, that you should keep an eye on during Black Monday. And of course, we'll be here with you to walk you through all of that on the Tuesday episode of that week as well, and get you all up to date to like what has happened and why it's important and how it actually ends up impacting the New Orleans Saints, if it does. Coming up next, will Tyrann, Mathieu, and Marcus Maye be the safeties for the New Orleans Saints in 2022? And a pretty interesting update for the New Orleans Saints secondary going into this weekend's game. We got that coming up for you as we continue on as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Today's episode brought to you by Ultimate Pro Football GM, one of the greatest mobile apps out there, particularly when it comes to mobile games. If you ever wanted to be a football GM or manager on football franchise, you can do that now on your phone, on the go, without having to pay a single dime, simply by downloading the Ultimate Pro Football GM app, which you can find at ultimate-gm.com, or you can just search Ultimate Pro Football GM in your app store. This allows you to hire coaches, coordinators, sports psychologists, team doctors, all of that. They also allow you to manage the salary cap, free agency, the draft, trades, facility upgrades, a whole bunch of stuff that you can check out. Places it in kind of this realistic world where you can it's not an arcade version. These are actual football things that you're doing. You can even backload contracts. You could be the New Orleans Saints if you want to. Kick the can down the road over and over and over again. So go and check them out today. Ultimate Pro Football GM, and you're going to be able to get a 100% free boost to your franchise as a Locked On listener by simply using the promo code Locked On in the game shop. Just make sure that it's in all caps. You can head over to ultimate-gm.com or search Ultimate Pro Football GM in your app store today. And don't forget that promo code Locked On for the 100% free boost. Start your dynasty today. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Who will be the safety tandem for the New Orleans Saints in 2023? Will it be Marcus Maye and Tyrann Mathieu, or can the New Orleans Saints look to be making a change there? We appreciate you so much for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, don't forget to also go and check out Locked On Sports today. Amazing stuff there right now around Damar Hamlin, including personal recounts from Locked On Pitt host Nick Farabaugh, who covered him in college. Joe Marino from Locked On Bills has had some stuff to say in terms of covering him in the pros. And then upcoming, we've got a phenomenal piece of information for you that kind of gives you some insight on how the NFL's, let's just say, like pension and salary stuff either works or doesn't work, depending upon who you ask. Garrett Bush laying it down over the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. And of course, we continue to hope the best for Damar Hamlin and his recovery. Fingers crossed. Apparently, lots of positive news so far, but obviously, we'll see how things go. Still in ICU, still in critical condition. You can go and check out Locked On Sports today for updates all around the world of sports, but particularly today, continuing to focus on the story around Damar Hamlin and his fight. So go and check it out wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as well. The New Orleans Saints went out and made some interesting decisions at safety this offseason. Malcolm Jenkins retired. They didn't re-sign Marcus Maye. And Marcus Maye went and, I'm so sorry. They didn't re-sign Marcus Williams. Marcus Williams ended up signing with the Baltimore Ravens. And so the Saints, pretty much for what they would have paid for Marcus Williams, went out and got Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus Maye to bring them in. And Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus Maye played, it was like subpar at the beginning of the season. Marcus Maye didn't even, really wasn't even present early on in the season. He's not present late in the season as well. Missed last week's game. I don't know that he's going to play this weekend either. We watched him kind of, he was present for practice, but he was just kind of walking around, like kind of miming through drills or marking it if you're a theater person like I am. So looking at kind of like the landscape of safety now for the New Orleans Saints, will that tandem, which has gotten much better over the course of the season, including Tyrann Mathieu, who's been excellent over the recent stretch, how much of that was just the team working out the kinks? And could that mean that if they really feel that they were working out the kinks with all this, that like we're looking at the same safety starting safety tandem in 2023? I think that's the case. I think Marcus Maye and Tyrann Mathieu get a second year. And this question comes about because in a couple of episodes ago, when I did Tuesday mock drafts, I drafted Brandon Joseph out of Notre Dame, one of my favorite safety prospects in this year's class, as well as John Battle out of Alabama, another one of my favorites. I think he spent some time at LSU as well. Or maybe was thinking about recruiting, or was maybe thinking about maybe committing to LSU. I'm not sure, but that's a question from Caroline Fitton over at Locked On LSU. And so I do believe that the Saints should invest in safety over the course of the offseason, because right now there's no backups. They ain't got nobody unless they bring back Smoke Monday, which I think is very likely, but we still have to see that happen, right? So like from where we sit here on January 4th, in the evening of January 4th. The Saints have no depth at safety behind Maye and Mathieu once the contracts are all done. So Daniel Sorensen's a free agent. Justin Evans is a free agent. I can absolutely see both of those guys back next year. JT Gray's a free agent. Would love to see him back next year, but we've seen Chris Banjo walk. We've seen Justin Hardy walk. So hopefully the Saints can keep JT Gray in the building. And you saw his value just this last week against Philadelphia Eagles. And so I do think that the Saints will have to make moves at safety, but I don't think they need to find new starters there. I just want to remind you here that based on the news that we got today, which I'm going to tell you about here in a moment, the Saints won't have their starting five, their anticipated starting secondary, take a single snap together in this 2022 season. The expectation was that Marshawn Lattimore and Paulson Adebo would be the starters on the outside, Bradley Roby in the slot, Marcus Maye and Tyrann Mathieu at safety. They have not taken a single snap together, not finished an entire game, not played a game together. They haven't taken a single snap together all season. And they won't. And here's why. Paulson Adebo, we were talking to him earlier today in the locker room, and he told us straight up, I'm not playing this weekend. Strained hamstring. Same thing, probably the same thing that's going on with Zion Williamson right now, which if you want updates on that, Locked On Pelicans is there for you. Jake Madison does a phenomenal job. But Paulson Adebo tells us he's not playing this weekend. Like he told us this on a Wednesday. See, I did it again. I looked at my wrist, not for time, but for a day. I don't know why I'm so weird. But he said he's not playing this weekend. So that means Alontae Taylor is going to get the start opposite Marshawn Lattimore. It'll be the first time we see that tandem all season of Alontae Taylor and Marshawn Lattimore. Because remember, when Lattimore was healthy and Adebo wasn't, Bradley Roby was starting on the outside. They spent some time with Chris Harris. Like, we haven't really seen a game of Marshawn Lattimore and Alontae Taylor. Remember, Alontae Taylor was also injured early on in the season too. So now we get an opportunity to see what could be the starting corner tandem next season. And we could see 4 out of the 5 this week that will be the starting secondary next season, because I doubt Marcus Maye plays this weekend. Fingers crossed that he does, because it'd be great to see the 5 of those guys together. But this is going to be really interesting to watch. And we kind of talked about it, right? Like, I could see where the New Orleans Saints would have made the decision anyway to start, give Paulson Adebo 1 game opposite Marshawn Lattimore, and then give Alontae Taylor 1 game opposite Marshawn Lattimore. I could have seen it working out that way anyway, just because it's evaluation season, right? So it's going to be interesting to see, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch because, like, let's face it, they're not going up against the most talented wide receiver core here. I mean, DJ Moore is phenomenal. But then you got Shi Smith, you got Laviska Shenault, who burnt them last year on a 60-plus yard catch and run, but they're not like the best at wide receiver. They're not the Philadelphia Eagles. And so it's a positive matchup for Alontae Taylor. You're going to hear Julian Council say in tomorrow's episode that DJ Moore will take that matchup with Alontae Taylor any day. I don't know if that's true. Like, DJ Moore's calling card is his speed. Alontae Taylor's fast. He's fast as fluff, boy. That's what he does. And so, like, that's his whole thing. So I think, like, not only do I believe that Marcus Maye and Tyrann Mathieu will be back next year, but I think you kind of get a glimpse almost at what the future secondary is as early as this weekend. Unfortunate, though, that the Saints unlikely to have Marcus Maye. But at the same time, Marcus Maye's got an outstanding court case, along with Alvin Kamara, that could lead to him being suspended for multiple games in 2023. So you might actually get to see something here that is of value in Week 18 that could end up looking like the starting secondary next year. Justin Evans was back on the practice field this past week or on Wednesday. I don't remember what his injury report designation is. I'm pulling up the text message right now. But like, there's a chance that like Justin Evans could be one of the guys that they see as a potential replacement for Marcus Maye while Marcus Maye serves his suspension. Justin Evans was on the injury report listed as limited for the shoulder injury, so he could be back this weekend. So too could PJ Williams. PJ Williams could be back this weekend too. And so with that, like, you could actually see something really substantial here this weekend in terms of what the starting secondary looks like and how they perform against a division opponent that they're going to face 2 times next year. So well worth the watch this weekend. But I do think Marcus Maye, Tyrann Mathieu will be back next year. And I think that that's a good thing, because a lot of where the secondary came up short early on in the season really came down to when they were dealing with those injuries. So if you can get them back and not have to shuffle things around, and then you have a consistent approach next year, it's a good way to go about it. But of course, the suspension for Marcus Maye will play a role in that. Coming up next, if Sean Payton gets traded this offseason, he already said, hey, Mickey, I'm going to call you about Taysom Hill. Could that be true? And if it did happen, how much could the New Orleans Saints get from Taysom Hill? I'm usually very, very conservative about what I believe teams can get for players. I'm not going to be this time. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the number one place that you should be going if you're looking for a job, but it's the number one place you should be going if you're looking to hire as well. As 2023 gets started, you might have a lot of turnover, a lot of change over there. You want to get your new year started off with the right group of hires, and LinkedIn Jobs helps you do that. You've got over 875 million membership profiles that LinkedIn will make sure that your job gets in front of with all of the targeting tools, and making sure that it gets in front of the right group within that too. It can cull a little bit of that pool to make sure that you're hitting folks and getting the folks that are good matches for what you're looking for in terms of experience, in terms of fit with your culture, everything. Like, it's really, really cool. So they've got some really great stuff over there, and it's one of the reasons why small businesses voted LinkedIn Jobs number one in terms of returning or bringing in quality candidates versus their leading competitors. And if you really think about it, LinkedIn is so dang good, you don't even know who LinkedIn's competitors are unless you work for them, and you probably got that job using LinkedIn. Wouldn't that be funny? So if you want to check out LinkedIn Jobs, helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster and for free. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Let's get it. Who Dat Nation, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Appreciate you very much, as always, for being here with us. This is such an interesting question. I want to make sure that I give a shout out here. This is to Walt Crawford 6153 over in the YouTube comments, who asked the following question. Sean Payton has stated publicly, I'm adding the publicly there, that he would like to trade for Taysom Hill. If Sean goes to another team, what do you think Taysom's trade value would be? So this is an interesting question for a couple of different reasons. Walt, great question. The first thing is, where do you start with Taysom Hill's trade value? Do you start with it as a 32-year-old tight end? Do you start with it as a 32-year-old tight end with some quarterback capabilities? Or do you start it off as a backup quarterback, right? Like, so many times Taysom Hill has played all of the other roles, the special teams demon, the lead blocker, the pass catcher, all this other stuff, but also has like legitimately been QB2 at the same time before. So does that raise his value because of what he can do for you at quarterback? We've also seen him be a game changer from the quarterback position, even when he's not throwing passes, but he's a closer. He's iced games. He did it this past week in Philadelphia as a quarterback and under center. And look, it doesn't work the same way if he's not under center. You're not going to run, halfback power with Taysom Hill and find the same amount of success that you're finding from a tried and true QB power, which Sean Payton implemented into this offense along with Pete Carmichael, and that the Saints have carried on into 2022. So that's number one. The second part is, do you charge a premium because you know Sean Payton wants him, right? Like, there's a big difference between, I'm just going to call you up and see if there's a little bit of interest, and maybe if the price is right, I'll see if our team and our GM would be willing to. No. You talked about it during the offseason, fam. Like, you've already spoken about it. You've already said, hey, Mickey, I might give you a call on the television, on the TV. You said that. And so does that mean that you then get to kind of take Sean to the ringer a little bit and be like, yeah, you can have Taysom. We'll trade you Taysom. If the Saints trade Taysom Hill as a post-June 1 transaction, they save $9 million across the salary cap, and they take on about $4 million of dead cap for the next couple of years. Not a big deal. Not a big enough deal. When you can free up $9 million, $9.9 million, actually, it's closer to $10 million. When you can free up $10 million and trade away. Now, do the Saints really want to trade him away is the other thing. So that's the other piece, is that, like, if Sean wants him bad enough, then the Saints can run up the price, because the Saints probably don't want to trade Taysom Hill. They love Taysom. And he's been a core piece to what the New Orleans Saints have been able to do over the course of the last couple of seasons. And he's probably been the most successful thing that you've put under center in the past couple of years, if we're being honest. So with all of that, like, the Saints also value him highly. So his trade value could be a second round pick. It might be a late second or an early third, but it really could be higher. Like, usually when I'm talking about these veteran guys that are 30 plus years old, I usually say it doesn't matter what position they play. Outside of quarterback, it doesn't matter like how much we like them, or how much the media likes them, or how much the fan base likes them, or the organization likes them. You're probably going to get a day 3 selection. Look at like Donnell Hunter's trade history and things. Not Donnell Hunter, Everson Griffin and stuff like that. Like, these guys that kind of got shipped around, Yannick Ngakoue, like these guys that kind of got shifted around, and at most you're talking about like, late day 2 selections, early day 3 selections. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see the Saints actually be able to net a day 2 selection by trading Taysom Hill. And if they designate it as a post-June 1 transaction, they also save money in the process. If they traded him as a pre-June 1, then they take on like $12, $13 million in dead cap, and they save like $50,000, like legitimately $50,000, not $500,000, $50,000. Like, not even. I'll take $50,000 anyway if the Saints want to hand it out to somebody. But like in the grand scheme of a $220 million salary cap that's expected next year, or somewhere around there, yeah, big deal. Very, very big deal. I mean, not at all a big deal. Sorry, not at all a big deal. So I could really legitimately see the Saints getting a day 2 selection. So if you think about like, there's been some Bleacher Report reports versus some of the like ESPN reports in terms of like what the asking price is going to be for Sean Payton, is that like if the asking price for Sean Payton is what Bleacher Report is reporting, which is a second round selection, which I don't think is, I like no shade at like where they've heard that or anything like that. I don't see that being the case. I think they will look for a first round pick. I think the asking price will be a first round pick. I don't think you start asking low. That's just, no organization is going to do that. So you have a potential Hall of Fame head coach, very likely Hall of Fame head coach here, that's looking to do something that no NFL head coach has done before, which is win a Super Bowl with two separate franchises. So yeah, you ask for a first round pick at least, right? You ask for a first round pick as a part of the package is what it is. But if the Saints do that and then they trade him and his team, Taysom Hill, for a second round pick in the next year, or even a third round pick in the next year, like that's a pretty good situation, right? Like that's a good haul for those, to move that tandem. But I don't know if the Saints would be interested in doing that. They like Taysom, I will say Drew Brees. Dennis Allen likes Taysom. Obviously, he's been a core part of what the Saints have done. But like, if you're courting a free agent quarterback, does courting a free agent starter get impacted by the idea of like, oh, you also have to share snaps with Taysom Hill? Does that end up impacting your ability to bring in a starter ready player, right? Like if they enter the Jimmy Garoppolo chat, if they enter the Geno Smith chat, and they're looking for a legitimate starter to come in and compete with Andy Dalton, if they bring Andy Dalton back, or if they want Andy Dalton to be the veteran, really good backup, but the veteran like mentor to a younger free agent quarterback, or even a drafted quarterback, all of that, like, does that get impacted by saying, hey, you got to split snaps with Taysom Hill? And then do you alleviate that, free up some of your salary cap situation, continue a good relationship with Sean Payton and the franchise that he goes to, and send away a core player? Is it enough? Is it worth it? I think it might be. Like, how much longer is Taysom going to be effective, right? And so I think, yeah, if you get offered something that makes it worth it, if you can designate it as a post-June 1 transaction, and if it opens up your free agency pool a little bit, why not? Why not? In a crap division next year? Yeah. Yeah, whatever. Chaos. Let's go. Let's get crazy. Like I have a hard time arguing against it, other than Taysom Hill does a good job. And as we've seen in the recent past, sometimes value equals value. Whether that's on-field value, i.e. Taysom does a good job, and you get good value in terms of the draft capital, or whatever the trade capital is, sometimes value equals value. And so you make tough decisions. Saints have certainly shown that they have a capacity to do that, and they oftentimes come out on the right side of it. I don't think that they will when it comes to the CJ Gardner-Johnson thing, but that's okay. But in other cases, Jimmy Graham, Brandon Cooks, they've come out on the right side of this stuff. Sorry, those are the only examples that come to mind right now. But they've made tough decisions in the past, and they've come out on the right end of it. So could they do that again with a Taysom Hill? We'll see. We'll see. Going to be a very interesting offseason for the New Orleans Saints, for certain. Coming up tomorrow, crossover Thursday in the morning, and then we'll have our Jaron Hall BYU quarterback breakdown as a part of our Thursday draft profile, or draft prospect breakdown. So 2 episodes for you. As always, we continue on 2-a-days for at least one more week. We'll see if we can continue 2-a-days moving forward through the offseason. Certainly there will be enough talking points. So I appreciate y'all, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day for your second listen. Make sure you go and check out Locked On Sports today. Don't forget, DeMar Hamlin's Toy Drive link is still in the description, whether you're listening or watching. I appreciate y'all, as always, making me a part of your day, a part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.